And welcome on in to the Third Round Reversal Fantasy Football Podcast. Brett Malbud here with you, with Zach Malbud. Zach, how are you?
I'm doing well, Brett. Obviously, we're in week 9, so I mean halfway done with the regular season in the NFL almost, and it's crazy how quickly this season has flown by. We get a bit distracted, you and I, when it comes to some other sports going on right now. So there's a lot going on, and like I said, the NFL season has flown by so far.
Yeah, we had the sports equinox the other day, and so all 4 sports right in the swing of things, right in the middle of college football as well, and so yeah, good time to be a sports fan. And World Series game in a little over an hour. Our Yankees trying to battle for their lives as they obviously made it to the World Series. Now the Dodgers are pushing them to the brink here, and so we'll get right into it though as we break down some big news here in the NFL. Let's start out in Indianapolis. Anthony Richardson benched by Shane Steichen, and I think that this was a move that was coming over the last few weeks. I think that as far as his value goes, it doesn't really go anywhere, I would say, in the dynasty community. I mean, maybe a bit of a dip, obviously, him not playing the rest of this year, but I don't know that this is like the end for Anthony Richardson, the way that some people are saying.
Yeah, I mean, I think when you look at Anthony Richardson, it was coming in terms of like the production has just not been there, and the Colts have not looked like a good football team really on offense when Anthony Richardson has been at the helm, and that's the difference between Anthony Richardson and Joe Flacco. So when you look at it, people can talk about Richardson, and last year, yeah, he got injured, so he kind of had the that backup role and looking at the starter and sitting behind the starter, maybe getting some knowledge and experience there. But I feel like when you look at the top quarterbacks in the NFL, Brett, I mean, the top one is Patrick Mahomes, who, I mean, sat a year, his first year. We're in a stage now where I feel like a lot of these players are forced into their rookie year and expected to be like the greatest thing ever. They're all expected to be CJ Stroud. They're not all going to be CJ Stroud, though. Even CJ Stroud, after last year, now into this year, has probably taken a dip based on expectations, just based on how they've played. So the quarterback problem, I would say, it is a problem in the NFL of just teams relying way too much on their young quarterbacks. And then you get a situation like this with Richardson where, yeah, he's only played 10 games, and it's crazy to say that, but he's already being benched by the Colts. And I think from that standpoint, that's something that NFL teams have to, I think, work on when they're looking at their new quarterbacks, rookie quarterbacks. Their expectations cannot be like rocket high. Like it cannot happen that way, Brett. And when you look at Anthony Richardson, he's just on the raw end of the deal here. I don't think it's like the end for Anthony Richardson. Like there's no doubt that within the next year, he will be the starting quarterback of the Indianapolis Colts, and they will be working with him and getting him going. But for right now, they said it. Joe Flacco kind of gives them the best chance to win right now, and that's what they're looking for. And for that reason, Anthony Richardson will be on the bench.
Yeah, like I said, I think that I think you made a great point when you say that teams are so quick to get like the shiny new toy in there as quickly as they possibly can. And we've seen Patrick Mahomes, Jordan Love sat multiple years behind Aaron Rodgers before he even got a chance to see the field. Yeah, I think that we're just sort of in this age of like, what have you done for me lately? And these GMs are just under so much pressure to get it done immediately before they're dismissed. And, I guess the fans really have a lot to do with that, and just this social media age where everybody's so quick to criticize and you're almost guilty before proven innocent in a lot of cases. And so there's a lot of people who are like trying to ship Anthony Richardson out of town, and they're like, oh well, his next team, he'll be successful there. I don't know that that's coming very quickly, just to put it out there. I think that he might even get a chance back in the end of this regular season to come back. And obviously, we'll see how the next couple weeks go for the Colts. But as far as them progressing over the next couple weeks with Joe Flacco, I do agree. It does give them the best chance to win. Anthony Richardson's completion percentage has been awful, horrendous. Under 40% completion percentage. It can't happen as an NFL quarterback. And so, yeah, he'll sit, he'll learn, take techniques obviously from a veteran who has done it for a really long time and been successful at it. And so obviously different style, but as far as the passing goes, I think it'll be a real big help learning from Joe Flacco for Anthony Richardson.
Yeah, we'll talk about this team later, Brett. But I mean, big bump for Josh Downs, who has obviously got that great partnership so far this season with Joe Flacco, and probably a little smaller bump for Michael Pittman Jr., who hasn't been at his best, not even close to it, with Richardson at quarterback, but he'll still be in that 25 to 30 range now as a wide receiver for Indianapolis.
All right, so let's jump to the next piece of news here. Diontae Johnson has changed teams, going over to the Baltimore Ravens. Zach, I think that Zay Flowers wasn't going to be the only guy for this team. That was very clear. We talked at length about these two tight ends that they had. They couldn't really get either one of them going on a consistent basis. So they make a move for Diontae Johnson. Do you think that this actually hurts anyone's value? Maybe Derrick Henry?
I don't think it really hurts too many guys in the offense's value. I do think that when you look at somebody like a Zay Flowers, I do think it limits the upside of a Zay Flowers. That's really, I think, where it hurts this team, because when you look at Baltimore, it's pretty simple of what they're looking for. They're looking to pound the ball down your throat with their star running back in Derrick Henry. They're looking to get Lamar Jackson out in space, and they're also looking to run an offense where the tight ends get involved. They have multiple options there, and maybe those are like their red zone type of threats in Mark Andrews, Isaiah Likely, and whoever else they bring in for a certain week. So when it comes to the wide receivers already really have a role in this offense, Brett. You've seen Zay Flowers not really have too much of an impact so far this year, which is not really surprising based on the fact that they added a star running back. When you have a running back like Derrick Henry and then the duo between him and Lamar Jackson, why would you go anywhere away from that? It just doesn't make sense. You're going to win games if you have both those guys doing stuff on their own and being successful with it. So it doesn't make sense for them to throw the ball enough. And that's, I feel like, the reason why they haven't. So they're going to stick to their game plan of like I said, the duo between Jackson and Henry. And then when you look at the tight end room, they always go to those guys, Andrews, Likely, and whatever. And then when you look at the wide receivers, it's kind of, all right, maybe get a deep shot here and there, throw a couple for a first down. That's really all I'm expecting from Flowers and Johnson here. I'm not expecting some insane stat lines coming up. They're flex plays, but that's pretty much it, Brett. I think the upside of these guys is very low because now there's so many options in this offense.
Yeah, I agree. I think that, the Derrick Henry thing, because that's really the reason I even asked you that question, is I saw a lot of people that were kind of knocking Derrick Henry's value and that, they're going to pass it more. I don't see that. I think that they're passing it the right amount that they want. They want a guy who can catch it on a consistent basis. And it'll actually free up Derrick Henry, I think, a bit more, because I felt like down the stretch of games, teams were almost stacking the box to try to stop him. And of course, Derrick Henry being Derrick Henry just kind of ran right through it. It didn't really matter for him. But let's catch up to him when he faces the wrong team where they're stacking the box and you kind of can't pass the ball. You have to hand it off to Derrick Henry because you're not getting production out of the passing game. This, I think, changes it a little bit. It will free him up a little bit more. And yeah, I'm actually excited for the other side of the coin, which is Xavier Legette. I think that that's going to be the guy that's going to free up and open up a little bit more. This is a guy who they loved coming out of the draft. Obviously, they made the move up for him, trading into the first round so that they can go get the fifth-year option on him. And they made that trade up with the Buffalo Bills, who ended up getting Keon Coleman on only a 4-year deal. But yeah, this is a guy that they were really excited about, who really wanted to be a Carolina Panther. He's from there, and now kind of the opportunity is in front of him, where he doesn't have to deal with Deontay. He's could be the number one option.
Yeah, I think he will, even with Adam Thielen maybe coming back in the next couple of weeks. Brett, obviously, he was on IR and is practicing again. But even so, like Leggett has the tools of a number one wide. So that's really good for him, good for his dynasty value, especially. So definitely a interesting situation with Carolina, obviously getting Deontay Johnson in the offseason. And then within 9 weeks, he's just out the door, Brett.
Yeah, pretty nuts. It's just kind of dysfunction station over in Carolina. And it just kind of is going to continue here. Bryce Young, he's the quarterback, then he's not the quarterback, then Andy Dalton car accident, so he's the quarterback again. So it's been a roller coaster, and obviously you have an owner who kind of is not staying out of his own way, and it's just going to continue to create headlines. And Dan Snyder's not in the league anymore, and so they're going to pay attention to this guy.
Yeah, 100%.
All right, so huge blow that happened over the last 24 hours. Stephon Diggs ruled out for the season with a knee injury with the ACL. Zach, this is just rough. Before we talk about the positives that we'll take out of this for guys like Tank Dell, Stephon Diggs, obviously big trade over from the Buffalo Bills, and like, okay, well, they have a lot of legit weapons here, and it kind of looks like it's falling apart. Nico Collins already is out. Stephon Diggs now ruled out as well. It just sucks, really.
Yeah, no, it's terrible, Brett. I mean, when you look at what Diggs was able to do in his first couple of weeks in Houston, I mean, they had some good weeks, he had some bad weeks, but you kind of you got what you expected really from a guy at Stephon Diggs as a number 2 option, you would say, in this offense behind Nico Collins. And then when Nico Collins goes down, yeah, Diggs is getting his targets. It's just a very disappointing one. Obviously, it was new scenery, a change of scenery for Stephon Diggs coming in from Buffalo in the offseason. And I mean, it's just a huge blow to Houston's offense, obviously wanting all of those guys. That's how they run their offense with all those wide receivers. So a big blow to them. Could have some step ups from a lot of guys, and we'll talk about them in a second. But as for Diggs's value in dynasty, like when you look at Diggs, it's now getting up there in age. It's not going to be all right retiring territory, but he's getting up there, like a couple years maybe, and call it. I think that's kind of where we're at right now, Brett. I would say if you are a Diggs owner, you're probably going to hold him because the value's low right now. And then you kind of have to figure out you're coming down to the wire, maybe start of next season, a couple weeks in, and you're trying to look for a move there, especially if you're a team towards the bottom of your league. So that's the hard situation right now as a Diggs owner in Dynasty.
So as far as the stocks go, I would say it's stocked down a little bit on CJ Stroud, and obviously takes a bit of a bump. But I would say that, as far as Joe Mixon's value goes, probably doesn't change that much. Dalton Schultz, I think, actually gets a big boost here because I think he becomes a top 12 option going forward for the rest of the season. Tank Dell, on the other hand, obviously he gets the biggest because now he doesn't have Nico Collins or Stephon Diggs to deal with. And then I would say probably slider bumps here for Xavier Hutchinson, John Mechie, Robert Woods even going forward here. But I don't know that I would put too much stock into those other 3 guys. Maybe Hutchinson, again, a guy who's younger and they liked him coming out of the draft. John Mechie, not as much, but they also liked him coming out of the draft. Obviously missed an early part of his career there with the leukemia, and he was able to recover, which was great. But, as far as it goes, like Diggs I should say Dell and Schultz, I think, get the two biggest bumps for me.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think when you look at this team, I would not look at like this week and freak out, because I think that it's just a tough matchup and it's going to be a little bit hard to judge in the first game without Collins and Diggs. But I mean, Collins, we don't know when he'll be back, maybe a couple weeks, obviously on IR right now. But until he gets back, yeah, Tank Dell is the lead man. So definitely a guy to really stock up on. And you mentioned not a big bump for Mixon. I think Mixon can get probably just a couple more carries, and that's pretty much it. But he's almost like at the max right now, Brett. I mean, what a player he's been so far this fantasy season, and definitely a guy who's just going to continue to roll as long as he's getting that solid amount of touches.
Well, exactly. I don't know how much more of a bump give Mixon. He's kind of already bumped up enough. And so, yeah, I just think, listen, we just talked about it at the top of the show when it came to Anthony Richardson. Like, we're going to watch CJ Stroud now play quarterback on a team where he's got one legitimate wide receiver, not to knock Xavier Hutchinson, John Mechie, Robert Woods. Robert Woods was good back in the day when he was playing for the Buffalo Bills. But, I mean, we're talking about, receivers there that I don't know can match the level that a Nico Collins was, a Stephon Diggs was. And so I could really loud for CJ Stroud. And I really wouldn't be shocked if all of a sudden all these people start coming after him and saying he's a bust, things like that. Great talent, but it's just, that's the reality that we're living in right now as just the football community.
Yeah, 100% agree.
All right, so let's jump into our standouts here. Zach, we got to start out with the big guy, CeeDee Lamb, 8th. A huge performance for him this past week. Finished with 13 catches for 146 yards, 2 touchdowns, a sweet 39.6 standard PPR points. Zach, I mean, it's up on CeeDee Lamb, and he is just going to be a monster. 17 targets for him. They just kept feeding him the ball, and he just kept getting open too, which I think was even more important. It wasn't like dink and dunk though. He was getting open downfield.
Yeah, right. I mean, when you look at this team and even this game against San Francisco, like they were down and they had to come back. So that will help the amount of touches he got and targets in the end. But Brett, 17 targets. Like 17 targets that's a lot. I mean, when you look at what this offense has, like, yeah, they don't have a lot. We're kind of expecting CeeDee Lamb to get those amount of targets, a fair amount. I don't think we've seen that too often, and that's something that I think Dallas really wanted to hone in on is like, all right, well, get our star guy the ball and let him do his magic and everything. Like, in the end, 2 touchdowns for him on 146 yards. So, like, you get him the ball, he's going to do big things. And I think he was able to prove that on Sunday night, Brett. When you look at this team, though, like, they are really sputtering and just figuring anything out to work for this team. I think when you look at that helps a guy like CeeDee Lamb, because they're just going to have to throw the ball and they're going to go to their star guy.
Yeah, I mean, listen, you're must starting him anyway, so it doesn't make any sense as far as like where we're ranking him. Like he's a must start. It just really, to me, shows like that they're going to continue to feed this ball to the way that we see those top receivers getting their looks. Where it started out, obviously, contract situation, and it was a little bit slow early for CeeDee, but he's picked up pace, and they're just going to, again, it wasn't even like they were doing dink and dunks. He was getting like 10, 15, 20 yards down the field, and him and Dak were just finding each other.
Yeah, 100%.
All right, so jumping to our next standout here, Cade Otton, the tight end on Tampa Bay. Zach, it was a big game for him. 9 catches, 81 yards, 2 touchdowns on 10 targets, with 29.1 PPR points. This was a breakout game. I think that Cade Otton over the last couple of years has started to, come around since the Tom Brady era ended. And this kind of put him really on the map with multiple touchdowns in a game. And now he's kind of, not to say he's the only show in town, but looks like he could be the lead guy here in this offense.
Yeah, and if something I'm going to give myself credit, I did say last week, and I was like, when people were looking at different guys, McMillan, Shepard, I'm looking at Cade Otton because he's the one that knows Baker Mayfield the best of those weapons. A lot of those other guys, yeah, they may have played with him down the road long ago at Oklahoma, like a guy like Sterling Shepard. But like Cade Otton in this offense and with this quarterback has worked really well. So I'm going to trust that guy and trust him to be one of their top guys. And sure enough, this week, I mean, he was really, really strong and getting those targets, getting those touchdowns. Very positive sign that this guy, as long as those two are out, and Evans and Godwin, obviously Evans probably out till after the bye week. So that's 3 or 4 weeks now, Brett. And then Godwin obviously out for the year. Cade Otton is sneaking into top 5, like top 6 in tight ends. Like, he's just going to get the target share. Some people say it'll depend on matchup and how defenses will guard up. I just think Cade Otton, if he's getting into those short yardage spaces, they're going to find him, and Baker Mayfield especially is going to find him.
Yeah, it's certainly fair. I think that, Jalen McMillan's going to start to kind of come into a bit of a role here as well. And so, while Otton might not get double-digit targets in a single game, I still think that he's going to have the most significant of any value just based on his, veteranship and ability to get open, especially downfield, ability to get open when he's the check down, and Baker's been using him.
Yeah, 100%.
All right, so we go to the rookies. For the last one here as a standout is Ladd McConkey. Zach, 6 catches, 111 yards, 2 touchdowns. He had 6 targets, caught all 6 of them, and that finished him with 29.1 PPR points. Ladd McConkey, listen, I think that this was a breakout game for Ladd, and it was obviously a rookie we talked about at length, and ability to get open quickly and ability to make his own open space, and he was able to do it. It just is, it's going to be the top option here going forward for the Chargers.
Yeah, 100%. And going to be Justin Herbert's top guy and his top weapon in the end, it looks like. And I love this one, Brett, because when you look at Ladd McConkey, all anybody talked about in the pre-draft process and everything, a great blocker, short yardage type of player. He could get you those gritty first downs and everything. I know this fantasy score is kind of outweighed by that long touchdown. Brett, a 60-yard touchdown. He grabs it with a couple guys around him and runs all the way for a touchdown in the end. We don't expect that from Ladd McConkey based on what the expectations were to start this year. And he's proven that he can do all kinds of things. And I think that's huge for this offense. It gives more trust between him and Justin Herbert. Obviously, his quarterback who's going to be with him for a while there in Los Angeles. And I think that's a very positive sign for this offense. Gives them a little bit of a different look. We know Jim Harbaugh offenses is more of run and gritty offensive line play and everything like that. But Ladd McConkey has proven that he can be a star wide receiver in this league as long as they get him into the right situation.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that, he is in the right spot right now, especially at Harbaugh is going to continue to use him the way that he's been using him and kind of figure out ways to get him the ball, whether it's, end around screen passes, the same way that it's going to be down the field on slant routes in space.
Yeah, agreed.
All right, so let's jump right into it. It is panic season for the New York Jets as their season is just basically in shambles right now. And so now they take on what could be the Halloween ghost at MetLife Stadium Thursday evening against the Houston Texans. And we just talked at length about Houston and where we sort of see the lineup going. let's start with the Jets here. Davante Adams has been okay, I should say. He hasn't been great to start out. You're still going to end up playing him in your lineup. I'm just rolling with the rest of them. Breece Hall, he's in. Garrett Wilson, he's in. Aaron Rodgers is only a super flex play for me. Not playing him, especially, Houston's been pretty good on the defensive front. And so I'm not going to play him in a one quarterback league. Staying away from the rest of the receivers, though. I know that Ty Conklin scored a touchdown last week and looked great. I just don't know the consistency I'm going to see out of Ty Conklin. So while I would say, yes, he's probably a good stash candidate, I'm staying away from him.
Yeah, I agree with you. And as Jets fans, I think the most surprising thing to me heading into this game, Brett, was that the Jets are actually favored against the Texans. And I know that has to do with probably injuries and everything for Houston. And obviously we'll get to them in just a second. But with how bad the Jets have been, to still be favorites at home against a 6-2 Texans team, pretty shocking in my mind. But I agree with you on all fronts. Breece Hall, Garrett Wilson, and Davante Adams are in your lineup. Aaron Rodgers as a super flex option. Could the Jets bounce back here? I mean, it could be just a big bounce back spot. But all signs are pointing to this season is just kind of all but over for the New York Jets. So it's something that they have to really hold on to and see if they can grab a win. Brett, on the other side, I'll bring it to Houston. CJ Stroud is actually a really bad option this week in terms of quarterbacks, just because going up against a tough defense on the road, short week, injuries to everybody, it seems, for his weapons in Houston. And obviously Diggs, we just talked about him. Collins is out for this one. It's going to be Tank Dell and a couple of other guys. And I think they're just going to have to rely on Joe Mixon in this game to get them over the line. Jets, we talk about it a lot, that their run defense has been pretty god-awful so far this year. So something that Joe Mixon is going to want to feed on. I think the Texans are going to really want to roll with Joe Mixon and allow him to take them across the line. So for that reason, I think Stroud, it's a hard one to be all right, avoid him in one quarterback leagues. I think you kind of have to. Super flex, obviously, he's in your lineup, but definitely a tough matchup. And as for Joe Mixon, obviously, is a lineup lock, and Tank Dell is also in your lineup. But I will say, I said it before, don't freak out after this week, because I think this week is just going to be a bit of a lull. Like I said, short week, a little bit harder for this offense to figure out a way to figure out life without Stephon Diggs and Nico Collins fully in the lineup. So definitely something to keep an eye on.
Prediction: I think that Tank Dell is going to actually be a buy low candidate after this week, because I agree with you. I think that this is going to be a hard one for him. I think that they're going to really try to put their guys up on Tank Dell, double him sometimes, and try to take that away the same way that they kind of go after Joe Mixon on the defensive front. But yeah, I actually prefer Aaron Rodgers to CJ Stroud this week. Just based on the weapons around him. And I'm not sure how much CJ Stroud is going to be able to use his legs. We didn't really see, outside of when the Jets played the Bills, we haven't really seen a quarterback rush really well against the Jets. And so I'm going to kind of temper my expectations for him there as well. Joe Mixon must start. He's still a top 5, top 7 option, whatever you want to put him in. You're playing him there. And then Tank Dell, you're starting him. But again, if you don't have Tank Dell and you would want to have Tank Dell, wait out this week and then see how your Tank Dell owner in your league feels. Dalton Schultz right there on the fringe. And if you have a guy like a George Kittle or something, then Dalton Schultz makes a perfect streaming option for this week. Jets have not been good at all against tight ends. And so it's kind of been one of their Achilles heels here.
Yeah, 100%.
All right, so let's jump to the next one, Miami and Buffalo. Zach, let's start out with the Bills here. It seems like they always kind of have the Dolphins number in the last couple of years, just kind of how it's shook out. That said, I kind of think it's start your guys here. across the board, Allen, Cook, Cade, Cooper. I'll throw Khalil Shakir in that as well. I think he's a good guy. That if you have him, you're starting him. Keon Coleman's probably a flex option. I think that's where I kind of draw my line. Probably a lower end flex option, and he is getting a bit of an uptick in his usage the way that the offense is going since Amari Cooper came in. That said, I don't know how much it's totally going to translate over. So for me, yeah, he's a flex option, but a lower one at that.
Yeah, I think it's just that my one thing with Buffalo is their wide receiver room, and I was optimistic about like a Khalil Shakir earlier in the year, and everything was kind of going his way. He was going to be the number one and rolling. They bring in Cooper, Brett, and all of a sudden Keon Coleman is stepping up and is something now. So now they have 3 wide receivers that you have to really choose from in this offense, and it makes things a little bit difficult for some Buffalo wide receiver owners. I agree with what you said with all the rest of the guys. It just come to a point where it could be a week like this against Miami. They're at home. It could be a blowout. They could just kind of blow the doors off, and you don't really know if any of the wide receivers are going to go crazy. Maybe it's just one of the 3. It could be one of those weeks, but I agree with you. They're all in the solid range of, they're either in your lineup or they're a flex option. Just we're at that point now where it seems like the top guys in the offense in Cook and Kincaid are rolling right now, of course, and Allen as well. And then the wide receivers, it seems like it's a bit of a drop from those other guys in the offense.
Yeah, and then on the other side of the ball, Miami's case, well, listen, it's Wednesday. It's early in the week. Tyreek Hill did not practice today. He didn't practice with a foot injury. Popped up late on the report last week, ended up playing anyway. So just know that he didn't practice today. But again, it is Wednesday. A lot of guys don't play. Don't do the Wednesday, and then we'll do limited on Thursday, come back Friday. So we'll have to watch the progressions on there, but should be noted. That said, you're starting him. Jaylen Waddle, man, I got a bone to pick with you. He only caught 4 passes for 45 yards. I had the highest of high expectations for him coming into this game against Arizona last week and just didn't live up to the hype. And so, he's probably a lower end wide receiver too. He'll be there in my lineup, but I'll be watching you, Jaylen Waddle, because it's not great. Devon, and you're starting him as well. I'd say Jonnu Smith is a potential streaming option, especially in those deeper leagues where you got the guys on bye and stuff like that. Jonnu Smith, another guy who can go out and stream. And then Tua, I don't know that he's a quarterback 1. He's certainly a super flex option though for me this week.
Yeah, and going up to Buffalo, never an easy game for Miami. So I agree with you. Start your guys in this game for the Dolphins: Waddle, Hill, and Achane, of course, and then Tua. You said a super flex option. Yeah, it's interesting right now with Miami because obviously the record is so awful. But then you look, they didn't have Tua, and even when Tua came back, you're kind of like, well, they still lost last week. So how can you really feel about the Dolphins right now? I think they're going to come out trying to just sling the ball around and get Tua in good spots and get those wide receivers in good spots. However, never easy in Buffalo, and Miami knows that better than really anybody in the NFL.
Yeah, it also doesn't help that I lost to you because of Jaylen Waddle. So, listen, that team is very frustrating, and it is what it is. But we move on, and we go to the next game. Denver at Baltimore. Zach, let's start out with Baltimore. We just talked at the top of the show about Deontay Johnson. Don't know if he's going to factor in too much in this one. I think he'll play. But, probably keeping him on my bench the same way. If you had him, like you weren't playing him already, and when Bryce Young came back, you probably shied away from him. So I'm sitting it out this week on him, and hopefully you have other options on there. If you do roll the dice because there are no options, then it is what it is. That said, Lamar, Derrick Henry, and I'd say Mark Andrews. And that's really Zay Flowers. I would put Zay Flowers in even with the with Deontay coming in, but he's probably more of the lower end wide receiver too, I would say. So it kind of just depends on what your team looks like. But that's it. I'm staying away from Likely. I'm staying away from Rashad Bateman. I saw a lot of that this past week about Bateman. Staying away from it.
Yeah, I agree with you. And when you look at like Mark Andrews and even like the tight ends right now, Brett, I think people are feeling like optimistic after last week. Obviously, it was National Tight Ends Day last week, and every tight end seemed to do everything that they hadn't been doing for the beginning part of the season. So there are a lot of guys coming back. There's a lot of guys healthy now, Brett. And there's a lot of tight ends that are available. So Mark Andrews is in that mix. I understand some teams may have like a Mark Andrews and Tucker Kraft. Yeah, like make your decisions there based on that. But if you just have Mark Andrews, put him in your lineup. He should have a solid week against Denver. I'm worried about the wide receivers, Brett, because even though Deontay may not play a lot, he's still going to be in there. I do think that impacts, like I said, the upside of Zay Flowers. They are also going up against the Denver Broncos, who have been a very tough defense so far this year, especially in the secondary. You're starting your main guys in Lamar and Henry, but those weapons, I feel like the Ravens offense can really focus in on their run game and working with the tight ends as well. And that could be probably the game plan at home this week, but should be an interesting one there. And on the other side, Brett, I'll bring it to Denver, as I would say Javonte Williams and Courtland Sutton are both in the range of being starters. And I think Javonte has definitely stepped up in recent weeks, proving that, like, yeah, he is the number one running back, even though McLaughlin is getting touches here and there. And they got some other guys that get those touches as well out of the backfield. Even like Bo Nix is getting rushing yards. I still think Javonte has kind of solidified himself as the number one there. And then Courtland Sutton, you kind of go back and forth each week. It depends on the game. This one, I smell more of a Baltimore leading and Denver trying to play catch up. And for that reason, I think Courtland Sutton is a solid, I would say, high-end wide receiver 3 this week against the Baltimore Ravens. As for Bo Nix, Brett, sneaking into quarterback 1 range. Like he's around there because of the rushing ability. He's definitely picked that up, and definitely an option if you're looking for a screamer this week, or maybe a quarterback is hurt. We obviously have questionable tags, Jaden Daniels, Jordan Love, some of those guys. Bo Nix has been really good, Brett. It definitely caught me by surprise so far this fantasy season.
Yeah, just as far as Bo Nix goes, yeah, you're right. He's sneaking into quarterback 1 range. He's certainly at the very high end of Superflex range, and so in those leagues, become a must start. But yeah, it is kind of fun to see him go. And the team that actually has him in our Dynasty League is in second place, which is pretty awesome. And Bo Nix is a huge part of that, as well as Baker Mayfield, who's another guy that just kind of came out of nowhere in the last year. And now is kind of battled himself back into being one of these top talents in the league. As far as Courtland Sutton goes, listen, I think that when Sutton had the 2 weeks ago, he didn't have a catch, and that was very frustrating. He didn't have a target. And so, I have him on one of my teams and I benched him. And so now come out, he catches 100 yards on 11 targets, and it's like, okay, well, I got to start him now, but what do I do? Like you said, I think the high-end wide receiver 3, like a flex, in those 2 wide receiver leagues, and so you got to play him because just the target share was astronomical to the point where it was like, okay, you got to put him in your lineup there. That said, I think Troy Franklin had a bit of a dud in a week where everybody was kind of looking for Troy Franklin to be the guy. I think this could be a bit of a big week for him against Baltimore, who is a tougher defense, because I think Baltimore is going to channel in a little bit more on Courtland Sutton, could free up some opportunities for Troy Franklin. So certainly a guy to go out and stash, and he's only rostered in like 7% of leagues. And so he was a candidate this week for me for my ones to watch, but definitely a guy to get and Javonte. I think that Javonte has kind of had an up and down season. But he's probably still found himself in the back 2 range where you're kind of not staying away from that. You're going to put him in your lineup. McLaughlin, a guy you probably could go out and stash. He did have 47 yards on 8 carries, which was the team high last week. And so right now I'm going McLaughlin. Guy who's a drop candidate this week actually is Audric Estime. Just haven't seen it yet. Haven't seen it yet. He got only 1 rush for 4 yards. And while the sky looked super high for him coming into this year, the injury kind of derailed him. He came back, and it looked like, 2 weeks ago where he had 5 carries. It was like, okay, well, maybe there's something here. Lost the fumble, and then it kind of all hell broke loose. And so he can safely be dropped, especially in redraft leagues. Kind of would, teeter on whether or not you keep him in D, because I think that's where the only place right now where he has any sort of value.
Yeah, 100% agree.
All right, Zach, the Cleveland Browns are back, and they host the LA Chargers this week. Listen, Jameis, man, that was so shocking to me last week, the fact that team came out and beat the Ravens. And Jameis looked like a competent quarterback doing it. Cedric Tillman, I think, had just a major week. I was thrilled that I went out and grabbed him in Dynasty and saw him there on waivers. And it was like, okay, well, the previous week he had 12 targets. What are we doing here? Is this legit? And obviously it looked like it could be. They bring in Jameis, and sure enough, he goes for 7 catches for 99 yards, ends up scoring 2 touchdowns, and just with 26 fantasy points. And so pretty good. I think that this team has more to go. Obviously, you're still riding high on the David Njoku train. Don't think that train's leaving the station anytime soon. He's had double-digit fantasy points in 2 straight weeks, finishing in the top 10 3 times this season. And so I think you're still rolling with him. He's a top 5 option. Jameis is a super flex option, and it's crazy to say it, but he is. He looked really good this week. I think that it was a tough matchup for him last week, and he still got by. And so, 1 week now before the bye week, play the Chargers. And so I think that, you're rolling Jameis in there if you're in a super flex league. Cedric Tillman, though, he is a flex guy, and you are putting them in there in flex options. He's probably one of the top flex options that's out there this week. Nick Chubb, 16 carries, 52 yards last week, and I think that it's fair to say that Nick Chubb is back, but I put back in quotations because the shares are there, and I don't know that Donta Foreman or Peter Strong or even Jerome Ford is going to eke back in. I think that they're going to ride Chubb, but we need to see the production. And so for me right now, he's a very low end running back 2, I would say. Needs to get that yards per carry up, and that's kind of where I need to see more production before I'm like, okay, set it and forget it, guy.
Yeah, exactly. Just getting back to normal Nick Chubb that we've been used to, Brett. And it'll just take a couple weeks for him to really get back to that tip-top shape. And but once he does, it definitely will have him in a really good spot for fantasy owners. But I agree on really everything. I think David Njoku has I was very worried as a Njoku owner myself, almost really giving up at tight end and trying to look for different guys. All of a sudden, my team was doing well, and all right, David Njoku's back, put him in the lineup. He's been absolutely fantastic so far, and especially now with this quarterback change to Jameis, should be really good outputs for the foreseeable future for David Njoku, as long as he's getting those high targets. And the other guy, Cedric Tillman, who, a guy that we didn't really expect, Brett, to step up like this. Some people thought maybe Jerry Jeudy could step up, and Jerry Jeudy could get targets, but it looks like Cedric Tillman is like the guy at wide receiver, and he's going to get the good looks from Jameis Winston. And yeah, he's definitely a flex play this week. A bit of a tougher matchup, definitely, against Los Angeles, who's been really good on defense so far this year. especially in the secondary. They've locked down a lot of top wide. So definitely something to keep an eye on. But yeah, I mean, everything you said about this Cleveland offense, it's a lot brighter than it was just a couple weeks ago. So definitely a positive sign for a lot of fantasy owners, Brett.
Yeah, and then on the other side of the ball, the Chargers. Listen, I think Herbert. Listen, he had a good game last week, and propelled himself into quarterback one numbers. But at the same time, I think that we just haven't seen it for him this year because I don't know that they've been giving him the opportunity to throw the ball as much as we could have. Last week, we saw 39 times that he threw the ball, which was a season high. And I mean, we kind of knew that was going to be the case coming into it. I don't know. We thought it was going to be this bad as far as run to pass ratio. Listen, J.K. Dobbins, I think, is a running back too. 14 carries last week, 40 yards. And, he caught 3 targets as well. So I think that there is an opportunity if you have J.K. Dobbins to put him in there. I'm still stashing Kamani Vidal, though. I'm so worried about the fact that J.K. Dobbins is so injury prone his entire career. And now he's playing in this run first and run second and run third offense. Because that's what it is. It's not just run first, it's run second and third also. And so Kamani Vidal is still a stash guy for me. Ladd McConkey, you got to play him after last week, but he's still probably a wide receiver 2, if not a flex option. Josh Palmer, I think that Josh Palmer, listen, I dropped last week and I was comfortable with doing that. I also have seen leagues where guys have picked him up. And it's like, okay, Ladd can't be the only guy here. He only threw the ball 39 times, Justin Herbert, and it was the season high. And so I don't know how much production you'll get out of Josh Palmer. I think that it's been very shaky as far as where we thought Josh Palmer's role was going to be and where it actually is. So for now, I'm staying away from him. If you want to go up and go out there and grab him, be my guest, I won't be one of those guys.
Yeah, agreed. And I definitely look at McConkey and Dobbins as obviously the top 2 options in this offense. They're lineup locks. And then, yeah, I agree with you when it comes to Herbert. He is a super flex option this week in Cleveland.
All right, so let's jump right to the next one here. Carolina has announced that Bryce Young is going to start the game this weekend against New Orleans. Zach, going right with the Panthers. I don't know that you can play Bryce Young. I don't know that you can play Xavier Legette. I don't know that you can play Ja'Tavion Sanders. I think the only guy that I'm actually playing in this entire offense is Chuba Hubbard.
I 100% agree with you. You kind of have to see it before you believe it. And when it comes to fantasy football, it's important to rack up wins and win games. Can't be taking risks like Ja'Tavion Sanders or Xavier Legette in an offense where you just don't know how it's going to look without Deontay Johnson in there. And you could say, oh, well, he didn't play last week. Yeah, they did not look good last week. So I'm not going to really go off of that, as well as look at this team and feel confident in anybody besides Chuba Hubbard, especially against New Orleans. Their defense, although banged up, it's always a tough matchup for Carolina.
Yeah, and I'll get to him in a little bit, but I think Xavier Legette is a big stash candidate because obviously the upside is there. Also kind of had my eyes a little bit on Jonathan Mingo, a guy who looked like he was, meshing with Bryce Young down the end of last season. And obviously this year, nothing really going. Now an opportunity to actually be a legitimate option in this offense.
Yeah, 100%. And I'll bring it to New Orleans, Brett, where Chris Olave going to be in your lineup, Alvin Kamara going to be in your lineup. I think when you look at the rest of the guys, I think Derek Carr is questionable right now, Brett. So interesting. We'll see maybe if he comes back this week or not. Could it affect obviously some of those weapons? I would say, yeah. I mean, if Derek Carr comes back, then you're bumping Chris Olave to better expectations than what he's kind of been giving you with all the quarterbacks coming in and out in New Orleans in the past couple of weeks. And then you look at the matchup against Carolina and you're like, all right, maybe I get like a boom week from Chris Olave. I think Olave owners really need that heading into this one. But that's really all I'm looking at this week on the New Orleans side. I think it's just going to be the main guys really stepping up for them.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that first off, I can't believe you would diss Taysom Hill like that week in and week out. Sorry, I couldn't help myself. Derek Carr had encouraging news, and that was the report today that they were encouraged by his practice session. So we'll wait and see on that front. But yeah, I think that the only two guys at this point that I'm looking at are Mara and Olave.
Yeah, 100%.
All right, so let's jump to the next matchup here. Las Vegas. They travel to Cincinnati for the 1:00 start. Zach, let's first start out with Las Vegas here. Brock Bowers, obviously, like we're rolling him out there each and every week. But I'm a little unsure on the Jakobi Meyers front. He was limited with an ankle. Caught a touchdown last week, and so it was great. 6 catches, and so you're probably starting him. If you have him in there, though, he's probably more flex option for me. And I don't know that the matchup for me is really going to show that he's going to have a huge impact. That said, Alexander Madison's been on one hell of a roller coaster ride this year. Last week it was a down, actually tough matchup playing against a team like Kansas City. He's had some good weeks here. I would probably stick him in as probably like a high-end running back 3. Also a flex option per se. But I don't know that I can put him more than that. And I'm not playing Gardner Minshew, sorry.
Yeah, no, it's fair. I think when you look at the two guys in Madison and Myers, they're both really flex plays. And then, of course, Brock Bowers is a lineup lock with the amount of targets he's getting, the consistency. It's been everything that Bowers owners like myself would have loved so far this year. So definitely a interesting matchup in Cincinnati. It could have like maybe blowout potential. I could say, obviously, Cincinnati wanting to bounce back after last week's like rumbling against Philadelphia, a team that still has playoff aspirations. They can probably go to town this week on Las Vegas, and I'll bring it to those guys, Brett, because Cincinnati, like now you got to look at your top guys in T. Higgins, who didn't play last week, and I think maybe that was a really hurtful one for Joe Burrow in this offense. Of course, him and Chase are in the top 15. Chase is obviously a top 5 starter this week. And when you look at the running back room, Chase Brown probably still getting the edge. I think we're in the same spot that we have been just a week later. Chase Brown got the touchdown last week as well, Brett. So when you're looking at that, it seems that Brown has the edge. And, of course, Burrow is in your lineup as well for the Bengals this week.
Yeah, I'm the same way. On the Bengals front, I think that you're starting Chase, and really the rest of it just comes down to now, is T. Higgins playing? If T. Higgins is not playing, Mike Gesicki is a good streaming option. T. Higgins is playing, Mike Gesicki's irrelevant, and you're not playing at all. You are going to play T. Higgins, though, in that case. He was doing some work on the side field today as he tries to get through the quad injury. So, we'll monitor it over the next couple of days. Chase Brown has gotten way more of the valuable carries than Zach Moss. So Zach Moss is an automatic bench guy for me, where Chase Brown's more a high-end flex option for me, if not a high-end running back 3. And then Joe Burrow is still a top 5 option. I don't know that that's going to really change. I think that the offense is sort of dictated towards him. And it was a down week. The last week, it was not as down week the week prior to that, as we started to see a little bit of a downturn here for Burrow. But I think he'll kind of get himself right here. And then obviously next week he plays against Baltimore, LA Chargers before the bye week. And so, I think that Burrow still, to me, is a top 5 option.
Yeah, agreed.
All right, so let's jump to the next one here. The New York Giants host Jaden Daniels and the Washington Commanders. Zach, the freaking Hail Mary was the coolest thing I think I've seen I'm Bears guy just on the side of the field, and he's like taunting the fans, and he's waving goodbye to them. And then the play starts, and he's still waving. And then and you got Bears fans pointing, "Hey, go get back in!" Runs across the field, tips the ball. Noah Brown makes a ridiculous catch off a tip, and they win the game. It just was one of the coolest moments I think that I've seen in the last couple of seasons for that rookie. And just looked down and out. They were at like plus 50,000 or something like that, 50,000 to 1 odds before that drive. And you know, I'm bummed that neither of us cashed in on that, place $1 on the bet there. But it's just insane that drive even existed. And even that the Jaden Daniels looked like at one point on that last play that he was going to get sacked, runs to the complete other side of the field, made himself some space before and got that ball. So just insane. As far as this week goes, he's playing the Giants, and the Giants defense is a tale of two cities. It's like the front is really, really good and tough to play against, and their back end has been not good. And so if Jaden Daniels can get rid of the ball quickly, I think he'll have a good day. Top 5 option. And, if he can use his legs, if he can get outside and get away from that defensive line, I think outside the pocket, Jaden Daniels could be really good against this Giants defense. So top 5 option for me. Brian Robinson is a running back 2 for me this week. Terry McLaurin, you're starting him, high end, wide receiver 2 at that. Noah Brown, who had a ridiculous catch, not playing him. Sorry. It was a season high for him and 6 targets. He's off the radar. It is what it is. And he made a good catch, but to the bench you go. Zach Ertz, I think, has been very reliable. Great streaming option. He's had double-digit fantasy points in 2 straight weeks. I'm looking more towards him to go side to side with Terry here going forward.
Yeah, pretty much start your guys and McLaurin and Ertz as the pass catchers. Then you got Robinson and Daniels in the backfield. It should be a pretty straightforward week for Washington. And crazy to say that Jaden Daniels may have had one of the most memorable moments of his career, Brett. I mean, that early. We're only 8 weeks in, and comes up with something like that. Very, very cool to see. And he's rolling right now. As long as he stays healthy. And obviously the ability to even play last week with everything that he was going through with the rib injury, I mean, it just proves what kind of competitor he is, and just an unbelievable quarterback and a great fantasy option, as always, each and every week now.
Yeah, and I just think, like, from the fantasy perspective, the fantasy community perspective, it was just a really cool thing to see Matthew Berry go as nuts as he did. The lifelong Washington Commanders fan just go ballistic on that play, especially on Sunday Night Football pregame, which it was just cool. It was very cool.
Definitely, and when you look at the other side for the Giants, like you're pretty much relying on the main guys in the wide receiver room. Of course, Malik Neighbors is in your lineup. And then you have the options of Robinson and Slayton, who are more flex plays this week. Washington's defense, you kind of go back and forth when it comes to the secondary. They've had some really good games recently. I also think they've played some pretty bad offenses that don't move the ball as well, so it kind of skews the stats a little bit. But when you look at it overall, for the Giants, like, Tyrone Tracy has taken over as the top back in my mind right now, Brett. Of course, he's questionable this week and obviously went down towards the end of the game on Monday night. So something to keep an eye on there. But it seems like he took over as the number 1 back over Devin Singletary. And no matter who misses time, like, they'll be clearly, those 2 guys will be the number 1 back in this offense. But it's really just relying on those top weapons. And I think it's the Neighbors show surrounded by a bunch of flex plays. That's really the Giants offense for me, Brett.
Yeah, I mean, Daniel Jones has gone 2 straight weeks now, finishing with single-digit fantasy points. And, I mean, you talked about it at length earlier today. In our Dynasty League, in our Superflex, Daniel Jones was my 3rd guy. Well, right now with the Anthony Richardson benching, he's my second guy. So I'm going to be forced to play Daniel Jones this week in the Superflex spot. So Danny Dimes, I'm on the Danny Dimes bandwagon here. But yeah, you're not playing him in most leagues unless it's one of these sort of Superflex leagues where all quarterbacks are gone, and then you're just like, oh God, I got to rely on this guy. Yeah, that's sort of my reality here. As far as the rest of the guys go, Malik Neighbors is for sure a top 10 option, and his value, honestly, is going to continue to be hampered by the quarterback play, and I don't really see it ending until next year when they have a different quarterback that isn't Daniel Jones, that isn't even Drew Lock, because I don't know that Drew Lock gives you any sort of confidence that Malik Neighbors is going to get this big uptick, in touchdowns and pushing the ball down the field very quickly. Wan'Dale Robinson, 5 passes for 30 yards. It was one of the most underwhelming performances of the entire year for him. He's kind of off the radar for me right now, where it felt like there were a couple good weeks just a few weeks ago where it was like, okay, this guy's a really solid flex option week in, week out. That ship has sailed. It's really just a one-man show here. I don't know that I'm putting Theo Johnson, anywhere near my lineup. I don't know that I'm putting Slayton in anywhere near my lineup. It's just not great. Devin Singletary, right now, I would say that he has no relevance only because Tyrone Tracy has kind of unsurged him. That said, Tyrone Tracy's right now in the early stages, per Brian Dable, of the concussion protocol. So there is a chance that Devin Singletary has some sort of value, but not much.
Yeah, that's definitely fair.
All right, let's jump to the next matchup here. Atlanta, they host the Dallas Cowboys. Zach, let's start out with Atlanta. Kind of just start your guys. You're starting Kirk, you're starting Pitts, Bijan, Drake London, Darnell Mooney.
Couldn't have said it better. And they get a great matchup against Dallas this week, whose defense has been pretty abysmal. So could be a big week for a lot of those guys on their home field in Atlanta.
Yeah, let's jump right to the other side, the Dallas Cowboys. And I think that it's kind of been the same name of the game here where you're okay, playing CD, and Jake Ferguson's been great, so I'm playing him too. What do I do about everybody else? What do I do about the running backs? What do I do about Dak? Dak has been up and down. Dak's kind of on his upswing, I feel like, right now. A good matchup, obviously, coming up against Atlanta before he has to face Philly, Houston, but then it becomes really easy for him down the stretch after that. So I think that this is really, we've turned the corner of like the, hating on Dak. Listen, I think that it's been 3 straight games now that he's had 2 interceptions in each game. So yeah, those things will happen. I get it. That said, I think that we're not going to see what we saw that week in Detroit where it was just like abysmal and they're getting blown out. I don't see that going forward. I think that they've sort of figured out the name of the game, and the name of the game is throw to CD, and when CD is not open, throw to Jake Ferguson. Just kind of how it is. And Holbert has figured his way into there. Turpin has figured out his way into there as well. And those 2 guys have some sort of role, not a fantasy relevant role though, by any means. These guys can't run the ball. That's their problem. Rigo Dowdle was sick and got, it was a scratch at the last second. They bring in Dalvin Cook. They bring in Zeke, who can't move the ball at all. And it just, that was not good. So now you got Rico Dowdle. I'm not confident in him though. So he's probably going to be a stash guy for me, unless obviously you have like a Jordan Mason or something, and then he's on a bye. There is the case where that sort of will be like, okay, well, I have to Rico Dowdle. I'm not confident at all in Rico Dowdle. So, moving forward. And then Dak, listen, he's probably a top 12 option this week. That he's that borderline quarterback one. Like I said, the upturn is coming.
Yeah, I agree with you, and I think this offense is going to have to throw the ball in this game. So your big weapons in Ferguson and CD should have big outputs this week in Atlanta.
Yep. And then on the other side, start you guys. Right? Yeah. Start you guys.
Yep, agreed.
All right. So let's jump to the next one here. New England. They take on Tennessee. Zach, let's start out with the Tennessee Titans here. Mason Rudolph is going to be the quarterback. I don't know how much confidence I have in anybody outside of Tony Pollard. It's kind of like the same thing we said last week. I feel like I'm repeating myself. Calvin Ridley is probably a flex option, but I don't know that he's anything more than that. And he wasn't practicing this today, so we'll see. You got to monitor reports, obviously. But after what was a pretty good week with the 15 targets, I'm still not confident in the entire offense outside of Tony Pollard.
Yeah, no, it's definitely fair. I think when you look at it, it's Ridley as a flex play and Pollard's in your lineup. And that's pretty much the Tennessee offense right now. You cannot trust a lot of others. And yeah, you mentioned that Ridley didn't practice today. And if he's out for this one, then it's just Tony Pollard running the show. They should have a pretty straightforward week this week. They're at home. They're playing New England. Should be pretty simple. I think they rely on Tony Pollard a lot in this one to get them the win in the end, Brett.
All right. And then on the other side, New England. I think that as far as the Patriots go, it's been pretty okay. I mean, Drake May got hurt and he's in the concussion protocol. So I think that sort of just hampers the offensive value of a lot of these guys. I'm saying probably you're putting in Henry as a streaming option. Ramondre, you're playing Ramondre no matter what. But I don't know that I can play the receivers this week with Jacoby Brissett there the way that I would have if Drake May was there. So I'm staying away from Pop Douglas and the likes of them this week.
Yeah, 100% agree. It's going to be more Ramondre and Hunter Henry getting them over the line, and I think it'll just be a mix of the wide receivers getting targets from Brissett this week.
Yeah, I would also just add if Drake May can go, Pop Douglas becomes a flex consideration. But I don't know that I'm going with Booty or Bourne or Osborne or etc.
Yeah, agreed.
All right, so let's jump to the next matchup here. It's the Chicago Bears as they travel to Arizona to take on the Cardinals at 4:00. Zach, let's start out with the Cardinals. Marvin Harrison had a big bounce back game, finished with 20 fantasy points, 111 receiving yards, 78 of them coming in the second half. Just looked really good. And so I think, he's back, in your lineup without any sort of hesitation like it was a couple weeks ago. James Conner, you're playing him. Listen, I think he didn't look great. He still had 20 carries last week. Didn't look great though. As far as the efficiency goes, I'm still riding with them. Chicago hasn't been amazing this year. Obviously, Hail Mary aside, they haven't been that great at the defensive front. And so I think James Conner has a real opportunity to bounce back with a bigger game here, and he kind of saved his day getting into the end zone. Trey McBride, automatic start. Kyler, he's the quarterback one as well.
Yeah, really start your guys here. And I think it should be a good matchup for this Arizona offense that, it looked like they kind of got back to normal last week and got things together. But those main guys, Connor, McBride, and especially Harrison, really stepping up. And that's really what we expected from Arizona before the season started.
On the other side of the ball, DJ Moore was held in check, and he had only 4 targets on the day, 2 catches for 27 yards. So it was a little bit of a downer. But that said, I think you're just rolling him back in your lineup. The guy who did get the targets was Keenan Allen. Only caught 2 of them, though. He had 7 targets, only caught 2 of them. And he's probably not on the radar for me this week in flex consideration. So staying away from him, stay away from Rome Odunze. Cole Kmet, I would say probably for me, is a potential streaming option, although I think last week wasn't that great as far as the turnout goes. Only had one pass that he caught. And so I think for me, like tight ends day, everybody heard Cole Kmet was that. Like, the meme of like Squidward and he's watching everybody outside partying. It was that. That was Cole Kmet being Squidward there. You're playing Swift, and I think that Caleb, you're playing him as well.
Yeah, 100%. Caleb, more of a super flex type of option, just with a lot of these guys back in full shape and not too many bye weeks this week. But yeah, 100% agree with you. And when you're looking at these options in this offense, it seems like it's come down to Swift and as well as DJ Moore. DJ Moore, you're just looking for a little bit more, no pun intended there. You're looking at what he can possibly do to fix these a little bit of problems that have been going on in this offense. And I think once they figure that out, it brings this Chicago offense to a whole new level. So expecting a solid week from him here against an Arizona secondary that has not been great.
All right, jumping to the next one here. Jacksonville at Philadelphia. Zach, let's start out with Jacksonville. I think Trevor Lawrence right now has just kind of plummeted as far as his value goes. In Dynasty right now, I wouldn't sell it. I know that there's a lot of people who are like getting old for them. Not selling them. I think that the sky's still the limit for him, and we haven't seen it. It doesn't really help that there's really nobody around him. But it's kind of the move moving forward here. As far as Tank Bigsby goes, you're playing him right now. He's questionable for this weekend. But as far as the carries go, 18 carries, 78 yards, you're still riding high with him. There is a chance that Travis Etienne is back. I think that if they do bring him back, it's probably not going to be in a huge capacity with hamstring injury. And so for me, I'm just kind of laying low right now, following the reports. Let's follow to see if he progresses throughout the week before I make any sort of call on him. Brian Thomas, though, is right day to day, and that was a big update that we got from Doug Peterson. So we'll see what happens as far as the MRI goes. It went well. But I would say as far as the value goes this week, he's probably a flex option for me until, if he does just come out and he's healthy and he totally is off the report, whatever, like you're playing him. But for right now, he's a flex consideration for me. Doesn't play. Evan Ingram is like a top 3 tight end option. Right now, I'd put him probably just outside the top 5, but playing him no matter what.
Yeah, 100% agree with you. And obviously we'll keep an eye on Thomas's situation this week, Brett. But when you look at it, obviously Christian Kirk, an injury that we didn't talk about earlier, Christian Kirk being out now for the year with a broken collarbone, like that's a huge blow to this Jacksonville offense. Obviously one of the weapons that they continuously went to. It gives a bump to both Evan Ingram and Brian Thomas that they'll get those targets and even just maybe rely on the run game a little bit more. But I think the biggest bump goes to those 2 top pass catchers and a Jacksonville offense that they're really trying to figure anything that'll work for them. It is a tough matchup. They're going on the road. It's going to be in Philadelphia. So this may be a bit of a long week for Jacksonville this week.
And then on the other side of it, let's start out with Devonta Smith, because you were really excited when you traded for Devonta Smith, and it just looked like, okay, well, he didn't play really well against the Giants, so therefore, value down. And then you come out, obviously the 2 prior weeks where he doesn't get a big share of targets in this one, 6 catches, gets a touchdown, 85 yards receiving. I think Devonta Smith is a must start for me this week. And, he's probably fringing right now on that wide receiver 1 range. Certainly a high end wide receiver 2. And you must be licking your lips over the fact that you made that deal. You're rolling him out. You're rolling AJ Brown out, Barkley as well, and Jalen Hurts. Right now, Dallas Goedert is questionable, not practicing with a hamstring injury. I feel like this has just become a weekly thing with Dallas Goedert. He can't get himself healthy this year. And so that sucks. But uptick for the rest of the guys then.
Yeah, 100%. And meanwhile, that is why my fantasy football friends, why you keep tracking buy lows and all of that. Great value for me on Devonta Smith this last week. So I'm definitely hyped up about that.
Yeah, certainly a reason to be. Jumping to our next game here, and what is a highly anticipated matchup here, Detroit at Green Bay. Zach, let's start out with the Packers. Jordan Love has been moving around better, was the update today with the groin injury, and we will see what happens this week. I think that this is a potential spot where we kind of get those mind games out of LaFleur as he is the opponent, and whether or not Love can go. I'm expecting him to play this weekend, but I'm also expecting them to announce that he's a game time decision and they'll figure it out in warmups. And that's sort of how I see it going, because the Packers aren't shy about making it known that they love the gamesmanship. And that's sort of been the name of the game for them over the last bunch of years. So I don't think it's any different here. Love, to me, he's a super flex option for right now. Becomes probably a higher end super flex option depending on what progresses throughout the week. Josh Jacobs, you're playing him though. And, he missed practice today. I just think it's more of a precaution than anything, but we'll monitor the reports. But if Jordan Love can't go, and it's Malik Willis, then Josh Jacobs becomes like an instant running back one must-start guy. Jaden Reed, or as he was referred to earlier today in our group chat, Jalen Reed, who is not the same person as Jaden Reed, is definitely a must-start no matter what. The second-year player has just been an absolute stud all year and sort of has hit a block in these last 2 weeks. And I still think that the best is yet to come on this guy. The previous 3 weeks, he had double-digit fantasy points. And so I think we're going to get back into the swing of that before the bye week hits in 2 weeks for the Packers. After this game, they hit a bye week. And so, opportunity here knocks on the door. Romeo Doubs, I think, also is a potential guy who has some nice flex appeal. He had 72 yards on 6 targets. So for me, I think that's another potential guy. And then Tucker Kraft is obviously a good option, and on tight ends day, he caught a touchdown, and that was awesome. His breakout continues. Double-digit fantasy points now in 4 games out of the last 5.
Yeah, 100%, Brett. And when you look at this offense and both of these offenses, really start the main guys. But I think when it comes to the Love situation, it'll depend on his health, and that'll make your decision for guys like a Romeo Doubs, maybe even a Tucker Kraft a little bit based on your options. But even so, like if he's in, a lot of those guys are in your lineups. Dobbs probably a flex play, and Reed obviously in your lineup, and of course the top 2 there with Kraft, and then you have Jacobs next to Jordan Love. So a lot of those guys, going to be in your lineup, and definitely lock them in there. Brett, I'll bring it to Detroit, where we say it every week: start your guys, and this offense is rolling right now. They didn't even need Jared Goff. It goes under the radar. Did you know that Jared Goff only had 85 passing yards last week, Brett? They were up so much against the Tennessee Titans that they didn't even need Jared Goff to throw the ball. They said, all right, we're going to have David Montgomery throwing for passing touchdowns in the end. Like, unbelievable stuff from Detroit. Obviously, Jared Goff fantasy owners were not happy about that. Sorry, rough topic there. But this week should get back to normal. They're going up against a division rivaling Green Bay on the road. They're going to need to win this game to really start your main guys with Goff, Gibbs, Montgomery. Laporta came back last week, so that's really, really good, and finally bounced back into normal shape, it almost looks like. And, of course, you got Amon-Ra St. Brown at wide receiver.
Yeah, I agree on all fronts. I would put asterisks on the start your guys thing, just because I think Jared Goff is probably on that fringe of starters there this week. Battled an ankle injury heading into last week, and so kind of would still be on the fringe. And so, yeah, you're starting him unless you have a potential better option this week. But yeah, ride the high on this whole offense because they're still fun to watch.
Yeah, 100%.
All right, Zach, we get to my favorite matchup of the day. Los Angeles Rams, they travel to Seattle. It's always tough to play in Seattle in that, stadium against the 12s, and it's so loud in there. But for the Rams, it looked like all is going well right now. They get their guys back in what was just a complete surprise, and we talked about it last week. Like Puka Nacua was activated. We were like, oh, he's going to be on a snap count. Oh, temper your expectations. And it wasn't just us. The whole fantasy community like, oh, I'm not going to play him. You can't play Puka Nacua. Goes off immediately, like within 5 minutes of the game opening. Ends up catching 9 targets, or 7 of 9 targets, 106 yards. Didn't score a touchdown. It didn't matter. Puka looks back. And, listen, I think that they kind of kept it under wraps, and it was a really good job by the Rams organization to not really let anything leak. And then sure enough, that day comes back and it's like, boom, he's in there, and only a couple practices under his belt, but they felt confident that he was going to be able to run in motion. He looked good. And so for me, you're starting him. Cooper Kupp also came back from injury. Looked great, found the end zone. He's the guy that scored the touchdown, 5 of 8 targets, 51 yards, and the score. And so you're rolling Cooper Kupp out there as well if you have him. Matt Stafford, I think, is a start this week in what should be a pretty good matchup for him with his weapons there. Kyren Williams, you're rolling him out there like you do every week.
Yeah, agree on all fronts. I picked up, actually, for those who maybe even need that, like CJ Stroud, my main quarterback, picked up Matt Stafford. He's going to be my starter this week instead of CJ Stroud in one of my big leagues. So definitely a great matchup for him. And obviously having all of his weapons back now, those three main guys in Kyren Williams, Puka Nacua, and Cooper Kupp means usually a lot of good things for Matthew Stafford. So should be a good one this week for him. On the other side, Brett, I'll bring it to Seattle, where Geno Smith is in quarterback 1 range, just based on he just throws the ball a ton, and he gets a lot of fantasy points out of it. And he's going up against a Rams defense that he can maybe take advantage of on his home field. When you look at the rest of the guys, you're going to have Kenneth Walker in your lineup, of course. You're also going to keep an eye on a guy like DK Metcalf, because obviously he's questionable right now and got carted off the field a couple of weeks ago, and he didn't practice today. Optimistic that he could come back to practice Thursday, that Mike McDonald is saying, and maybe play against the Rams on Sunday. So just keep an eye on that. And obviously monitor the situation with DK. If he's in, yeah, it bumps down a guy like JSN a little bit, but he's still in that flex range anyways. Against this Rams defense. Those two guys are really the two that I'm keeping an eye on in the wide receiver room. Yeah, Tyler Lockett has been doing some stuff, but I think he's just lower on the list. The main 3 guys, though, in Walker, Metcalf, and Smith-Njigba, if they're playing this week against Los Angeles.
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm with you on all fronts. I think that Kenneth Walker, the only thing I can add is that Kenneth Walker was really quiet last week. 9 carries, only 12 yards, and so it wasn't a great day for him. And Charbonnet, it looked like he was outplayed by Charbonnet. So while the panic could set in, I think that this is an opportunity actually to go after a potential option in Kenneth Walker as a buy low moving forward. It's been a couple of times that Kenneth Walker has struggled this season, and so. A potential opportunity. I think he'll bounce back, though, against a team that still doesn't have Aaron Donald,
Yeah, definitely fair.
All right, so let's jump to the next one here. Indianapolis. They will travel to Minnesota for Sunday Night Football. Let's start out with the Colts, and we talked about them at the top of the show, but Anthony Richardson has been benched. Joe Flacco is in. Are you playing Joe Flacco at all in Superflex leagues?
No, thank you. I would stay away because Minnesota's defense is pretty darn good so far this year, Brett. Although, yeah, there's been a couple of shaky weeks like that. That's a tough defense to go up against. I would say that as far as his options, I'd rank Josh Downs higher than Michael Pittman Jr. Don't know when we really would actually be able to sit there and say that. It's crazy to say, but that's just the reality. Josh Downs gets the targets when Flacco's in. Pittman, yes, he gets targets, just not at the same level. So I think Josh Downs gets a big week here. Of course, Jonathan Taylor in your lineup, and Pittman is also like in that all those guys probably in a flex range in terms of Downs and Pittman. Taylor, of course, is a must start, but yeah, I'm probably itching away from Flacco. Maybe in a super flex based on your options, you kind of decide from there, but not the greatest matchup, I don't think, this week. Plus, zero rushing value from Joe Flacco, so that's another thing that'll hurt his fantasy outlook.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think that Josh Downs, you're playing him this week. Pittman, he missed practice today, and so we'll see what happens actually on the Pittman front with the back injury. But if he is good to go, then you're rolling him out there. But yeah, should be noted. And then JT, you're putting him out there automatically, and I think that JT actually gets an uptick based on the fact that Flacco is playing instead of Richardson. Zach, on the other side of the ball, Sam Darnold, top 10 option week in and week out, and you're playing him. I would say Aaron Jones, you're playing him. You're playing Jefferson. I think TJ Hawkinson might actually fall into the conversation now, and it's the comeback tour, as it looks like he's going to end up playing and making his season debut on Sunday Night Football. And yes, in a year where the tight end position has just sucked, plain and simple, this is a potential at the end of the tunnel for somebody who may have went out and drafted TJ Hawkinson as a potential stash guy and just kind of kept him on their bench or IR spot for the entire time. So I'm actually rolling with TJ Hawkinson this week. I think that this is going to be one of those where they try to get a touchdown. And to me, that has been the success for tight ends this year. And it's sort of as the name of the game that it was from years past, where it was like, touchdown or bust for a lot of those guys. And so I'm playing him this week.
Yeah, I agree with you. And the situation right now in Minnesota is more of like, is TJ Hawkinson coming back really diminishing what Jordan Addison has as the wide receiver 2 in this offense? Obviously, it's been some really bad weeks, and definitely Addison, a guy that it's hard to trust him right now. As far as the rest of the guys, yeah, it's start your main guys, and could be a good matchup here for Sam Darnold against Indy's defense. And then you look at the rest of the guys, Aaron Jones, Justin Jefferson, and you mentioned TJ Hawkinson. So definitely a solid week upcoming for Minnesota, and should be a good one for them.
All right, so let's roll right into the Monday Night Football matchup. Tampa Bay takes on Kansas City. Zach, let's start out with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I would say Baker Mayfield right now has been a solid super flex. I'm going to keep him there. He is the super flex. Cade Otton, I think you got to start him as well. Top 10 option at the tight end position coming off of the hot week. Jalen McMillan hasn't exactly turned himself into this bigger piece. I still think that he should be rostered in all leagues, and there is the potential that he gets himself on a breakout, and then we'll talk next week about putting him in your lineup. But I'm going to kind of just sit this one out and wait. Bucky Irving, I would say Bucky Irving, you got to start him. 4 out of the last 5 weeks, he's had double-digit fantasy points, and you kind of have to ride the high end. They have been. At the same time, Rachaad White also has gotten double digits, and so I would probably start him as well in my lineup. And they're both probably, if you don't have both of them, I would say they probably factor into that flex option, high end, running back 3 range. And so that's where I would stick them. But I'm riding with them this week because Kansas City's been hit and miss against the run this year. And you kind of have to hope that this is a hit for Tampa.
Yeah, I agree with you. And when you look at Tampa, I would say Cade Otton's probably the only like lock it in. Okay, he's in my lineup this week. And then the rest of the guys, I would say they're probably flex options. Bucky Irving, Rashad White, as well as Jalen McMillan. Like they're all flex options and going up against a Kansas City defense at Arrowhead. Not going to be an easy game for them, but definitely still flex options and should be a good one for those guys this week.
All right, Zach, let's head into the final. Oh, no, we forgot the Kansas City Chiefs. Oh, my God.
The Super Bowl champs, Brett.
Right. Yeah, how could we forget the Kansas City Chiefs? Listen, you're starting your guys, and that's just how it is. Kelce, Zach, congratulations. You are the newest Travis Kelce owner. Does that actually make you a Swiftie? I don't know. But he is the number one tight end this week in fantasy, and for good reason. You're rolling him out there. You're rolling Mahomes out there. Kareem Hunt, rolling him out there as well. Xavier Worthy, you're going to put him out there. He had 8 targets last week. Yes, I know D-Hop will have some sort of a role. But until Worthy is unseated, I would say that you're kind of putting him out there. D-Hop, he did have 2 catches for 29 yards, which was not great, but we weren't expecting him to really be much. Now he's got a week of practice where he can kind of get himself in. Obviously a later game, so he gets an extra day to kind of prepare himself and get acclimated. So he's still a flex play for me this week.
Yeah, Brett, it could be the first week actually that I will say Patrick Mahomes could be a nice option this week. I mean, Tampa Bay's secondary is woeful. Like they're terrible. So when you look at that and what Atlanta was able to do to them last week and everything about it, like Mahomes could get some good fantasy stats up on the board this week against Tampa. And start your main guys, Kareem Hunt, of course, Travis Kelce, of course, and then the wide receivers, more of flex plays. But then you look at Patrick Mahomes, and I think he could be a nice starting option this week. Although a lot of people may boycott that one. They may be against it.
Yeah, I'm in the Mahomes boat, and thank God that he's playing a good matchup because, like I said, like Danny Dimes is my other option. So, come on, Patty, it's time to roll. Time to get back to big boy pants here.
100%.
All right, so now we head into our final stretch here. As we apologize to Andy Reid and the Kansas City Chiefs. There, we head into our lock of the week. These are guys who are ranked outside the top 20 in consensus rankings. Right now, I'm leading 4-3 after last week, though. You make a bit of a comeback here. Darnell Mooney, you took to my Jalen Waddle, and again, spoke about it. Jalen Waddle and I have a bone to pick with him. We are friends. He's going to stay in my lineup anyway, but we're not friends, as he finished with 8.5 PPR points. Darnell Mooney, I'm just an absolute tear this season, finishes with 18.6 PPR points. So, Zach, it's your pick.
Thank you, Brett. Yeah, I mean, a big one from Mooney last week. I'm going to go with a guy this week that I don't know how you bench him because of the quarterback switch. And now Joe Flacco is in. We talked about it a lot today. I'm picking Josh Downs. He's my lock of the week. I mean, just the outputs with Flacco at quarterback. I mean, targets north of 7 or 8 each and every game that he's played with Flacco this year, Brett. And for those reasons, I don't see anything different here. He's going to rely on JT in the running game, but then he's going to have to throw the ball, especially if he's down on the road in Minnesota. And Josh Downs, in my mind, is his top target over Michael Pittman Jr. So for that reason, Josh Downs, lock him in. He's going to have a big week this week with Joe Flacco at quarterback.
Yeah, I'm with you on it. I love that pick, and it was a guy that obviously you have first pick, but certainly it was a guy that I had on my radar till I saw that you picked him. I'm going with the veteran here, and Davante Adams, I think, has been a big struggle so far, as far as getting up to speed with the Jets offense, and the target share has kind of been very spread out. I think that this is a week where Davante can kind of get himself and kind of right the ship a little bit. Obviously, sky's falling for the Jets, and we get that. This is a primetime opportunity. Thursday Night Football. Aaron Rodgers is going to be pumped up. He already made that very clear on the last primetime game that they had. The energy is going to have to be really, really, really high for this Jets team coming in. And it's a game where, listen, we talk about Houston and how, they have no receivers right now outside of Tank Dell. This could still be a very high-scoring game. And so I think that Aaron Rodgers is going to have to push the ball down the field pretty quickly. And, Devontae might be the guy who comes out of it with the top target here.
Yeah, definitely fair. A big bounce back week for the Jets, and we'll see what happens with Devontae.
So let's wrap it on up here with the ones to watch segment, the best segment of the week. And Zach, I am back on the scoreboard and back in the lead here, taking Jalen McMillan last week with 9.2 PPR points a year. Rashad Bateman finished with 3.8 PPR points. So I'm back up in the standings 4-3. So it's my pick, and I am going to go out and take Xavier Legette, who's owned in only 22% of leagues. Zach, obviously, we talked at the very top of the show and the middle of the show about Deontay Johnson and the potential impact. This is a guy who is out there in just under 80% of leagues available and has the opportunity to be the number one receiver in his offense. And so for me, sky's the limit. And yes, I understand the offense that he's in. I don't care about that. I think the target share could be very high for a guy that they were very high on. I also know that they have an owner who was a little bit of a psycho and, don't want to come out and just say it, but hey, whatever. He's crazy. And so I think that they're going to have to get this guy the ball. The owner is going to be barking, hey, we traded up. We made this guy a first round pick. Let's do something with him. There's the opportunity for I'm not going to say a Malik Neighbors type role as far as target share, but I mean, it could be if he proves himself early. We could be seeing that sort of a name to the game there, almost like what we were seeing with Adam Thielen when he was playing with Bryce Young.
Yeah, love the pick here, Brett. I think when you look at this offense overall, somebody's got to get the ball. And why can't it be Xavier Legette? And it looks like he was the second option no matter what in this offense. Obviously, Thielen was out, and they had Deontay Johnson while he was there and healthy. And now Legette really looks like he's going to take over as that wide receiver one in this offense. And like I said, somebody's got to get the ball. So it definitely has a great chance to be Xavier Legette. Brett, I'm going to go with a guy that you talked about earlier. And actually, when you said it, I had already written his name down, and I was like, all right, cool. You just validated that I was feeling right about that. My thing in this pick is consistency. Zach Ertz has been very consistent at tight ends, and that's really all we can ask for at tight end. Just give me some consistent numbers each and every week. And yeah, maybe the upside is a little bit down based on, or the upside is a little bit lower based on options in the offense. But Zach Ertz has been consistent, put up enough points that you're like, all right, well, he's in my lineup each and every week. I think when you look at Zach Ertz in this next couple of weeks with Daniels at quarterback, like he's finding Zach Ertz, he's finding his tight end, and you should definitely be confident in him in the future. And definitely could be an option only owned in 35% of leagues, Brett. So definitely something to look out for.
Yeah, a really good pick. I think that, obviously there was a lot of hype about Benson not heading into this year. We haven't seen it. I don't know if we're going to see it this year. I just think Zach Ertz has kind of won himself the role. And I mean, he could end up being there next year. Who knows? It just looks really, really good and very consistent. Like you said, that offense is just kind of rolling, which is kind of crazy to see. I track it back to the owner. The owner's not there. Different group of people that are running that building, and different coach that's running that building there. So, yeah, Ertz to me is a really good pick, and the fact that he's still out there in that many percentage of leagues is kind of eyebrow raising a little bit. So certainly a guy to go out there and get. Zach, we have reached the end of the episode. We head to week 10 next week. Anything you're looking forward to here moving into week 9?
Yeah, I mean, I talked about Joe Flacco. We talked about him a lot this episode, just seeing how things change in this Indianapolis offense. I'm also looking at just some other guys. Houston, I said, don't freak out about it too early. This offense, how is it going to look a week after no Collins and no Diggs? Just some different looks for Houston. And I'm a Stroud owner, so definitely curious to see how that turns out for them.
Yeah, I'm certainly curious to see how the Flacco thing turns out as well. I'm also kind of curious to see, like I talked about, is Danny Dimes going to right this ship? And, it is just absolute, chaos in New York as far as the noise of who it can actually put in, as Aaron Judge just hit a 2-run homer. So that's pretty good. Good job, Yankees. It's just been pretty ridiculous as far as the noise level. So can he right the ship? I guess we'll find out. But it's not good. It's just not a good time in Giants land there. So with that, Zach, we will go check out our Yankees here. Before we sign off, we're going to get political for just a second here. Tuesday is election day. It is our freedom as Americans to exercise our right to vote in what is one of the most closely followed elections on record. It's extremely important for everyone to get out there and make sure your voice is heard. It doesn't matter if you're in a red state, a blue state, a swing state, or like many of you, a state of frustration. Please, please, please get out there and make your voice heard. Get out there and vote. Give us a thumbs up. And in the words of Aaron Rodgers, the night is darker tomorrow the dawn. We shall rise yet again. For Zach Malamed, I'm Brett Malamed. This has been the Third Round Reversal Fantasy Football Podcast. Catch you guys on the next.